Okay, now I've finished sizing all my cases. I forgot to mention one thing in the last scene there. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little decapping pin on the bottom of this die. Maybe I can zoom in here a little bit. And that pops out the primer from the primer pocket here as you're resizing it. So that's one step that that I didn't show. And this particular press has a it has a hose at the bottom of the column, the priming column here, and I've got the hose routed down into a little plastic baggie that's rubber banded on, catches the spent primers. The RCBS Rock Chucker press I had didn't have that feature, and I was chasing primers all over the place. It gets old in a hurry. Another thing I should show you is the this is the sheet that comes with this set of Lee dies. It's got all the Lee loading data for this particular caliber. Like I said, in this case, 9mm Luger. The specs, and then on the back side, it tells you how to set them up and how to use them. So that's pretty good load data there. Okay, so now the next step after we've got this all sized is to prime them. So I'm going to get another tray here so I can go one station to the next. One comment, I kind of like single stage presses because you're not going to make as many mistakes, or I should say you tend not to make as many mistakes, because you do everything once, then you move it over here, you can look down in the cases and make sure that you haven't failed to charge them with powder or double charged them. Okay, so now we're going to I'm going to take this die out. Notice I'm loosening it by the nut rather than grabbing the die body so that I keep the setting. Put that back in the die holder. And while we're doing that, I'll show you this is the Lee powder through expanding die. This die just puts a nice little bell on the case mouth so that there's room to accept the bullet without shaving it. And this little bit on the top allows you to put a funnel in there and charge it with powder at the same time that you're belling the case mouth. So screw that in. Some newer presses, I think one of the new Lee presses and also the Hornady Lock and Load presses have like a bayonet mount type thing or a snap-in mount, so you don't have to thread it in and out, but I've already bought this one and it's doing the job pretty well. So now going back to priming, got my little Lee priming tool here, and time for some new primers. Alright, bear with me a second here. Winchester small pistol primers. I'm going to load these babies up in the Lee hand prime. Managed not to drop any, which is nice. And now there's little grooves in this. I don't know if you can see it here, but there's little grooves in the primer tray where if you just shake these back and forth, it tends to get them going the right direction. And then there's a little channel here that primers go into so that they're face up when the piston comes up to seat them. So then we'll put on this cover so I don't spill them. That locks on. And now for priming. So I'll take one out of my tray, shake this until you can see a primer in there ready to go. I don't know if you can see it here, but it's there. It's right side up. Slide that in the shell holder, pointing this away from myself in case something happens and the primer goes off, I don't want to get a face full of it. And then I'll just gently push with 2 fingers, 2 thumbs actually, and it's primed. You want to run your finger across there to make sure it's actually slightly below flush so that the slide of your pistol doesn't hit the primer and cause a slam fire. Put that in the tray, get the next one. I'm going to zoom back so you can see my little process here. Grab the next one here, put it in the shell holder, prime it, run my finger over, put it in the finished tray. Make sure there's another primer. You'll get a feel for this after you do it 2 or 3 times. It's real low effort, especially if you use 2 thumbs, it's just minimum pressure. You can see the stage by stage technique. It's hard for me to mess anything up. I know that none of these are primed yet and that these are primed. So as I prime these, I'll move them over to this tray. As I prime these, I'll move them over to this tray. And every time I'll have an empty tray for the next step. Okay, with that we'll turn it off and come back after the priming's done.